Look at that old fool trying to tell us what to do." The eighth graders laughed as 74-year-old Earl Jenkins slowly climbed into the driver's seat. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the mirror. His voice was quiet when he asked them to sit down. To them, he was just another old man who couldn't control a bus full of kids, but hidden in his worn lunch bag was something that would change everything. A small blue ribbon with a star that represented the highest honor this country can bestow. A medal earned not with words but with blood, courage, and a single act that saved 47 lives in the jungles of Vietnam. What happened when these children discovered the truth would remind everyone that heroes don't always look heroic. Sometimes they wear bus driver uniforms and carry lunch bags, and sometimes they need a second chance to be seen for who they really are. Welcome to Untold Heroes Stories. Before we continue this powerful story, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who served in silence. Earl Jenkins had been driving school bus Route 47 for 3 years, and every single day was the same. The kids climbed aboard with their backpacks and attitudes, treating him like he was invisible, or worse, like he was their entertainment. "Morning, Mr. Slowpoke," would call out Tyler Morrison, the 8th grade ringleader who seemed to make it his personal mission to make Earl's life difficult. "Yeah, try not to crash us into a tree today, Grandpa," his friend Jake would add, causing the back of the bus to erupt in laughter. Earl would simply adjust his rearview mirror, check his clipboard, and start the engine. He never responded to their taunts, never raised his voice, never threatened to write them up, even though he had every right to. The truth was, Earl needed this job. His Social Security barely covered his rent, and the $800 a month he made driving bus helped him afford groceries and medication for his heart condition. At 74, he wasn't exactly swimming in employment opportunities. But there was another reason Earl endured the daily humiliation in silence, a reason that went back 50 years to a jungle clearing in Vietnam, where he learned that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with anger, but with quiet endurance. The students didn't know that their slow, shaky bus driver had once carried wounded soldiers through enemy fire. They didn't know that his quiet voice had once coordinated rescue missions that saved dozens of lives. To them, he was just Earl the bus driver, old, weak, and completely beneath their notice. Until the morning, everything changed. It was a Tuesday in October when the old Bluebird school bus finally gave up. Earl had been nursing it along for months, knowing that the district's budget was too tight to replace it anytime soon. But as he pulled away from Riverside Elementary with 23 kids aboard, the engine started making a sound that no amount of mechanical sympathy could fix. "What's that noise, Mr. Jenkins?" asked 7-year-old Emma from the third seat, her voice cutting through the usual chaos. Earl listened to the grinding, knocking sound coming from under the hood and knew immediately what it meant. "Nothing to worry about, sweetheart. We're just going to pull over for a minute." He guided the bus to the shoulder of Oak Street, a quiet residential road about 2 miles from the middle school. As soon as he turned off the engine, steam began pouring from under the hood. The younger kids in the front seemed nervous, but the 8th graders in the back saw this as an opportunity. "Nice job, old man," Tyler shouted. "You finally killed it." "My dad says they should have fired you years ago," Jake added. "You're too old to be driving us around." Earl pulled out his radio to call for a replacement bus, but the dispatcher told him it would be at least 45 minutes. Some of the younger children were starting to look worried, and a few were asking if they were going to be late for school. "Everyone stays seated," Earl announced, his voice still calm despite the growing chaos. "Help is coming. We'll be fine." But Tyler Morrison wasn't done making trouble. "We should just walk," he declared, standing up and grabbing his backpack. "Come on, guys. We don't have to listen to this old loser." Several of the older kids started to stand, and Earl knew he was losing control of the situation. In a few minutes, he'd have teenagers walking along a busy road, putting themselves in danger. That's when Earl made a decision that would change everything. "Tyler, sit down," Earl said, his voice carrying a tone of authority that none of the kids had heard before. There was something different about it. Not louder, but stronger, more commanding. Tyler hesitated, surprised by the change. Earl reached under his seat and pulled out a canvas bag that most of the kids had never noticed before. It was olive green, military style, with U.S. Army stenciled on the side in faded letters. "This is my emergency bag," Earl explained, setting it on the steps of the bus. "I've carried one like it for most of my life. It has everything we need to stay safe until help arrives." He opened the bag methodically, the way someone does when they have done the same thing hundreds of times under pressure. First aid supplies, emergency flares, a flashlight, water bottles, and energy bars. But it was what he pulled out next that caught 12-year-old Sarah Chen's attention. Wrapped carefully in an old t-shirt was a small wooden box. Earl handled it with a reverence that made the bus go quiet for the first time in 3 years. "Mr. Jenkins," Sarah asked softly, "what's in the box?" Earl looked at her, then at the faces of all the children staring at him. For a moment, he seemed to be deciding something. Then, very carefully, he opened the wooden box. Inside, nestled in faded blue velvet, was a medal unlike anything the children had ever seen. A 5-pointed star hanging from a light blue ribbon with "Valor" inscribed across the top. "Holy crap," whispered Jake, forgetting to be disrespectful for the first time in months. Sarah, who was the smartest kid in her grade, gasped. "Mr. Jenkins, is that the Medal of Honor?" Earl nodded slowly. "It is." The bus fell completely silent. "I've never told this story to children before," Earl said, his voice quiet but steady. "But maybe it's time." Even Tyler Morrison had stopped talking, staring at the medal with wide eyes. "This was given to me 50 years ago by President Nixon. I was 24 years old, serving in Vietnam as a helicopter crew chief. My job was to help rescue wounded soldiers from the battlefield." Emma, the 7-year-old in the front seat, raised her hand like she was in class. "Mr. Jenkins, what did you do to get that medal?" Earl smiled at her politeness. "Well, Emma, there was a day when everything went wrong, and I had to make some choices." He carefully lifted the medal from its box, letting it catch the morning light streaming through the bus windows. "It was March 15th, 1971. My helicopter was called to evacuate wounded soldiers from a landing zone deep in enemy territory. We were supposed to pick up 8 men and get out quickly." The children leaned forward, completely absorbed. "But when we got there, we found 47 wounded soldiers under heavy enemy fire. The landing zone was too small for multiple helicopters, and the enemy was closing in fast." Tyler, despite himself, asked, "What did you do?" Earl's eyes grew distant, remembering. "I told my pilot to leave without me. I stayed on the ground with the wounded soldiers, using my machine gun to hold off the enemy while we waited for more helicopters." "You stayed?" Sarah breathed. "By yourself?" "I wasn't alone," Earl corrected gently. "I had 47 American soldiers who were counting on me. Some were barely conscious, some were calling for their mothers. All of them wanted to go home. The bus was so quiet you could hear the autumn wind rustling the leaves outside. For 6 hours, I held that position. 3 different times, the enemy tried to overrun us. I was wounded twice, once in the leg, once in the shoulder, but I kept fighting, because those soldiers needed someone to stand between them and the enemy. When the rescue helicopters finally arrived," Earl continued, "I helped load every single wounded soldier before I got on myself. All 47 men made it home to their families." Emma wiped tears from her eyes. "Mr. Jenkins, were you scared?" Earl considered the question seriously. "I was terrified, Emma, but being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. It means you do what's right even when you're afraid." Jake, who had spent 3 years making fun of Earl's shaky hands, stared at those same hands holding the Medal of Honor. "Mr. Jenkins, why didn't you ever tell us?" "Because," Earl said simply, "heroes don't need to announce themselves. Real courage is quiet. It shows up when it's needed, does what must be done, and then goes home." Tyler Morrison, the ringleader who had tormented Earl for months, was crying. "Mr. Jenkins, we were so mean to you." Earl looked at Tyler with kind eyes. "Tyler, you're 14 years old. I was making mistakes when I was your age too. The question isn't whether you've made mistakes. The question is what you do next." That's when Sarah asked the question that changed everything. "Mr. Jenkins, if you're such a hero, why are you driving a school bus?" Earl smiled. "Because this is where I'm needed now. Those soldiers in Vietnam needed someone to protect them. You children need someone to get you safely to school and home again. It's all service, Sarah. It's all important." He carefully placed the medal back in its box. "Besides, driving this bus gives me the chance to spend time with the most important people in America, the next generation." For the first time in 3 years, Tyler Morrison felt ashamed of his behavior. "Mr. Jenkins, I'm sorry. We all are. I know you are, son, and you're forgiven." When the replacement bus finally arrived 20 minutes later, something had fundamentally changed. The children who climbed aboard the new bus were different from the ones who had been stranded an hour earlier. Tyler Morrison helped the younger kids carry their backpacks. Jake offered his seat to Emma when she looked tired. Sarah asked Earl if she could sit in the front seat so she could ask him more questions about Vietnam. But the real change became apparent over the following days and weeks. The paper airplanes stopped flying. The name-calling ended. Instead of chaos and disrespect, Earl's bus became the most well-behaved route in the district. More than that, the children started bringing Earl small gifts. Tyler brought him a cup of coffee from his mom's shop. Jake shared his lunch when he noticed Earl only brought a small sandwich. Sarah brought him a book about the Medal of Honor that she had checked out from the library. "Mr. Jenkins," Sarah said one morning, "I read about your medal. Did you know there have only been 3,500 people who ever received it?" "I didn't know the exact number," Earl replied, "but I know every single one was earned by someone who was just doing their job." The transformation wasn't limited to Earl's bus. Word spread throughout Riverside Elementary and the middle school. Teachers who had barely noticed the quiet bus driver began greeting him by name. The principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, asked if she could nominate him for the district's Unsung Hero Award. Earl politely declined. "I appreciate the thought, Mrs. Rodriguez, but I already have all the recognition I need," he said, gesturing toward the children boarding his bus. "They see me now. That's enough." The change in Earl's bus didn't go unnoticed by other drivers in the district. Carol Murphy, who drove Route 23, asked Earl for advice on handling difficult students. "How did you get them to respect you?" she asked during a driver's meeting. Earl thought for a moment. "I didn't demand their respect. I showed them who I was and let them decide for themselves. Respect isn't taken, Carol. It's earned, and it's given freely." But the most significant change came from an unexpected source: Tyler Morrison's mother. Mrs. Morrison had received multiple calls from the school about Tyler's behavior over the years. But when Tyler came home and told her about Earl's Medal of Honor, she made a decision that would impact the entire community. She called the local newspaper. "I think people should know about Mr. Jenkins," she told the reporter. "My son has been awful to him for months, but this man never lost his temper, never gave up on these kids. He's a real hero, and our community should honor him." Earl tried to decline the interview, but Mrs. Morrison was persistent. "Mr. Jenkins, my son learned something important from you. Other kids deserve to learn it too." The newspaper article, titled "Local Bus Driver Carries More Than Students," ran on the front page of the Sunday edition. It featured a photo of Earl standing beside his bus, his Medal of Honor visible on his shirt. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The VFW Post invited Earl to be Grand Marshal of their Veterans Day Parade. The American Legion offered him a lifetime membership. Local businesses began sending gift cards and offering services. But perhaps most meaningful was the letter Earl received from Vietnam veteran Robert Hayes, who lived across town. "Dear Mr. Jenkins," the letter read, "I served in Vietnam too, but I never received the recognition you did. I've been struggling with people not understanding what we went through. Reading about your experience with those children gives me hope that the next generation might be different. Thank you for showing them that heroes come in all forms." Earl called Robert that evening, and they talked for 2 hours. By the end of the conversation, they had made plans to meet for coffee. "I've been carrying Vietnam alone for 50 years, Robert told him. "Maybe it's time to share the load." Earl began connecting with other Vietnam veterans in the area. They started meeting monthly, sharing stories and supporting each other. For the first time since coming home from the war, Earl felt like he had brothers who understood. 2 months after the bus breakdown, Sarah Chen approached Earl with a request. "Mr. Jenkins, would you come speak to our social studies class? We're learning about the Vietnam War, and Mrs. Patterson said it would be helpful to hear from someone who was actually there." Earl was hesitant. "Sarah, I'm not much of a public speaker." "You don't have to give a speech," she assured him. "Just tell us what it was like. Help us understand." That Thursday, Earl found himself standing in front of 28 eighth graders, including Tyler and Jake, holding his Medal of Honor and feeling more nervous than he had in decades. "I want to start by saying that I'm not here to glorify war," he began. "War is terrible. It's loud and scary, and it changes you forever. But sometimes good people have to do hard things to protect what matters." For the next hour, Earl answered questions about Vietnam, military service, and what it means to serve others. He talked about fear, courage, brotherhood, and sacrifice. But the question that stuck with him came from Tyler Morrison. "Mr. Jenkins, do you think what you did in Vietnam makes you more important than other people?" Earl considered this carefully. "Tyler, the medal doesn't make me more important. It represents a moment when I had to choose between my safety and the lives of others. Every day, people make those same kinds of choices. Teachers who stay late to help struggling students, parents who work extra jobs to provide for their families, kids who stand up for classmates who are being bullied." He looked around the classroom. "Heroism isn't about medals or recognition. It's about choosing to do the right thing when it would be easier to walk away." After his classroom visit, Earl noticed that his influence was spreading beyond his own bus route. Students throughout the school began treating the custodians, cafeteria workers, and other support staff with more respect. Mrs. Patterson, the social studies teacher, incorporated Earl's visit into her curriculum. Mr. Jenkins taught us that history isn't just about famous people in textbooks, she told her classes. It's about ordinary people who do extraordinary things, often without recognition. Jake, who had been one of Earl's biggest tormentors, signed up for the school's community service program. Mr. Jenkins showed me that you can serve people in different ways, he explained. I want to help too. Tyler Morrison's transformation was even more dramatic. The former bully became a protector, standing up for younger students who were being picked on. My bus driver is a Medal of Honor recipient, he would tell anyone who would listen. He taught me that real strength comes from protecting people, not hurting them. Earl watched these changes with quiet satisfaction. The children who had once seen him as weak now understood that his gentleness was actually strength and his patience was actually courage. As Earl's 75th birthday approached, he began considering retirement. The school district had offered him a full pension, and his heart condition was making the long days more difficult. But when word spread that he might be leaving, the response from students and parents was overwhelming. "You can't retire, Mr. Jenkins," Emma, now in 4th grade, told him tearfully. "Who's going to keep us safe?" Tyler Morrison, now in high school, started a petition to keep Earl as a driver. "This man changed my life," he wrote. "He deserves to finish his career knowing how much he means to this community." The petition gathered over 500 signatures in 3 days. Mrs. Rodriguez, the principal, called Earl into her office. "Earl, I have a proposition for you. What if we reduced your route and gave you an assistant? You could work fewer hours, but still be here for the kids who need you." Earl was touched by the offer, but he had already made his decision. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I appreciate everything this community has done for me, but I think it's time for me to step back and let someone else serve these children." He paused, looking out the window at the buses loading students. "Besides, I've taught these kids that heroes don't have to be in charge to make a difference. Maybe it's time for them to be the heroes." Earl's last day as a bus driver was May 15th, 2024. The school district organized a small ceremony, but what touched Earl most was the personal goodbye from each of his students. Sarah Chen, now in high school and planning to major in military history, gave him a scrapbook filled with photos and letters from students he had influenced over the years. Tyler Morrison, who was graduating and headed to college on a scholarship, had written a letter that made Earl cry. "Dear Mr. Jenkins, you taught me that being a man isn't about being the toughest or the loudest. It's about being strong enough to be gentle and brave enough to be kind. I'm going to study education because I want to help kids the way you helped me. Thank you for seeing something good in me when I couldn't see it myself." Jake had enlisted in the Army and would be shipping out to basic training in the fall. "Mr. Jenkins, you showed me what real soldiers are like. I hope I can serve with half the honor you did." Even Emma, still in elementary school, had something to say. "Mr. Jenkins, you taught me that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear bus driver uniforms and carry lunch bags and have kind eyes. I hope when I grow up I can be a quiet hero like you." Earl's retirement didn't end his influence on the school community. The district renamed the Route 47 as the Earl Jenkins Memorial Route and installed a small plaque in his honor. But more importantly, the children he had influenced continued to carry his lessons forward. Sarah Chen started a program at the high school called Hidden Heroes, where students interview community members to learn about their service and sacrifices. Tyler Morrison became a peer counselor, helping younger students deal with bullying and behavioral issues. Jake sent letters from basic training, describing how Earl's example helped him get through difficult training exercises. And Earl continued to serve his community in smaller ways. He volunteered at the VA hospital, helping other veterans navigate their benefits. He spoke at local schools about military service and civic responsibility. "Retirement doesn't mean you stop serving," he would tell people. "It just means you find new ways to make a difference." Today, Earl Jenkins is 75 years old and living quietly in the same small house he's owned for 30 years. His Medal of Honor sits in a place of honor on his mantle, no longer hidden away. The children who once tormented him have grown into young adults who credit him with teaching them about respect, service, and quiet heroism. Tyler Morrison is now studying to become a teacher. Sarah Chen is majoring in military history and hopes to work for the Veterans Administration. Jake is serving his country with distinction, following in Earl's footsteps. And every Veterans Day, they all gather at Riverside Elementary to visit the plaque that honors their former bus driver. Earl's story reminds us that heroes don't always announce themselves. They drive school buses and stock grocery shelves and clean buildings and do 1,000 other jobs that keep our communities running. They endure disrespect with dignity, respond to cruelty with kindness, and wait patiently for someone to see past their humble exterior and recognize the warrior within. The next time you encounter someone in a service job who seems invisible, remember Earl Jenkins. Remember that the person taking your order, cleaning your office, or driving your children to school might be carrying stories of courage that would take your breath away. Look closer. Listen more carefully. Treat everyone with the respect they deserve, not because of what they've done, but because of what they might have done when no one was watching. Have you ever misjudged someone based on their appearance or job? Have you ever discovered that a seemingly ordinary person had an extraordinary past? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story moved you, subscribe to Untold Heroes Stories for more narratives about the quiet heroes walking among us, the ones who served with honor and continue to serve with humility. Because the most powerful stories don't demand attention, they wait patiently for someone wise enough to ask the right questions and brave enough to listen to the answers. Until next time, remember that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear the clothes of ordinary people doing extraordinary things in the most ordinary ways.